We have had interventions in Tanzania on rice since 2011. I've worked in Beira, one of the largest rice producing zones in Tanzania, since 2012. I've done beans program there, done rice as well. And actually, when the history of how Tanzania became self-sufficient in rice, Kilimo Trust, I think, will have a chapter in that book when it is finally written, because through one of our flagship projects called Competitive African Rice Initiative, funded by the GIZ and other partners, one of the game changers in Tanzania came in, and I will relate that also with Kenya, what we've done as Kilimo Trust as well on that. In Tanzania, just like we have pishori here in Kenya, pure pishori here in Kenya, a kilogram of pure pishori from Moya produced in Kenya. Who knows the cost of a kilo? Thank you. It is actually $2.60. That's exactly $2. Pure pishori rice. I'm telling you, most of us here, including myself, I cannot sustain that. Even when I have a little for my household, unless you are a very important visitor to my household. Maybe unless if the CEO comes visiting, maybe she can have a bit of that pishori cooked for her, because it is $2 per kg. So, but do you know why it is that expensive? It is very difficult to produce pishori rice. Tanzania had an equivalent of that particular variety in Tanzania. Very high aromatic rice called Kiela rice. You hear about Beira rice when you go to Dar es Salaam. Very high aromatic. Actually, if pure pishori is being cooked even a few blocks away, or maybe in the other room, that side, we can still smell it here if it is actually pure pishori rice. But producing that rice costs a lot in terms of inputs, because it is very highly susceptible to diseases. It is a heavy feeder, but unfortunately it is low yielding variety. So what you get per hectare or per unit area is so low compared to non-aromatic rice. And that applies to quite a number of other crops, because when you go to those which you call bitter cassava, for instance, for processing, their yields are so high. But sweet cassava, which you can just peel and eat, the yields are so low. Same case applies to rice. So Tanzania had that rice which they had stuck to for years. The production very low, cost of production very high, therefore very completely uncompetitive. So what did we do? We went and introduced, found a variety of rice that was not necessarily very aromatic. And I will tell you why we are talking about semi-aromatic. Even here in the city, what you pass as pishori rice is actually not pishori rice. It is very small percentage of pishori rice. The rest is actually imported rice from wherever. And that passes as pishori rice from Moya. So what is the population consuming? What they are consuming actually is semi-aromatic rice. But we realize that already breeders had already come up with a semi-aromatic rice. Not non-aromatic, but also not so aromatic. It is somewhere in the middle. But the yields are more than double, over 2.5 times more yields than the aromatic rice. So after all, if we are consuming semi-aromatic rice in the market, why don't we just produce semi-aromatic rice once and for all? Because after all, as you heard our CEO say, we have done quite a number of market studies on a number of value chains. And one of the ones that we have really done a deep dive on across the region, not just in Kenya or Tanzania, it is rice. And we know the consumption patterns, we know the market segmentation, we know the preferences, we know who consumes what, we know how sensitive consumers are on price. So actually, the issue of like people love aromatic rice and consume aromatic rice is a fallacy. In Mwea, over 99% of those farmers who produce pishori rice don't consume pishori rice. They sell over actually 100% of it and buy imported rice for their households. Themselves cannot afford their own rice. So therefore, we just introduced that semi-aromatic variety of rice, Saro 5. We have an equivalent here which I'll tell you about. It was a game changer. So we worked with the private sector, supported them to invest in seed multiplication, okay? then supporting farmers downstream to demonstrate to them and work with them. You actually put up an acre in a strategic place in the rural areas. You are able to have that rice grow. You plant with them, do everything with them until you harvest and go and mill with them so that also they see the millability. And the millers also see it can be milled, and the recovery rate, or what you get if you put 10 kgs or 100 kgs of your rice, what you get is a very good percentage of rice, less breakages. So you take the value chain actors through that process, and they appreciate it, then they uptake it. Therefore, most of the farmers move away from that very high aromatic rice to that semi-aromatic rice. Do you know what that means? 2.5 times more yields, meaning also 2.5 times more income, more volumes also for there. So what did we do? We worked with the seed producers, farmers who are seed companies, farmers who are doing production, the millers also who are taking this rice so that they are able to expand their capacity. And some of those guys that drove that, fortunately in our program we had a grant component where we were able to give them a grant, an unreturnable grant. Some of them we gave them about $400,000, which is slightly about quite a bit of money in terms of millions, about 50 million Kenya shillings. And they were able to, invest in the extension system, invest in staff, farmer outreach, and also because of that, with that kind of money in the bank, the banks also became, those companies became attractive to the financial institutions, and they were able to. So that spread even in areas where we were not intervening. Same case has happened in Kenya. You've heard about the story of Komboka rice. Komboka rice is the equivalent of Saro 5 here in Kenya. We picked up that story when we brought Kari East Africa here in Kenya, the Competitive African Rice Initiative here in Kenya. And we found a variety that had been developed by IRRI, the International Rice Research Institute. For many years, it was actually in the lab, but the uptake was not there. So when we realized from the market studies and what the market actually is consuming, we said, this is semi-aromatic rice. People is what they are consuming after all. Set up those demos with the farmers, participatory variety selection. We plant Komboka rice here, which is semi-aromatic. We plant Pishori, we plant other varieties there. With the farmers, we assess the cost of producing that rice. We harvest together. We go and mill together. The millers see how it is being milled in comparison to other rice varieties. Then on top of that, we cook in a basically we call it participatory variety selection. The farmers and the other value chain actors select a variety for rice for themselves based on including the consumer. We cook all the varieties, each one come and taste. They say, this tastes better. We take note of that. This yields better. We take note of that. The miller said this has better recovery rate, that when you put it in the mill, you recover quite more in terms of percentage than the rest. We take note of that. Then we compare in an environment like this, actually out there in the field, with the researchers, with government officials, everyone, consumers, everyone represented. Then we select a variety. We say, this is the one we go with. We go out there full throttle, basically championing it amongst farmers, amongst millers, and the uptake becomes much more easy because they chose it for themselves. We didn't come and tell them, guys, here's a variety that does very well. They have not even seen it doing very well. You are the one telling them, but they saw it. Komboka today is a success story. Go Google Komboka rice. You see the story of Kilimo Trust and the partnership that we developed with Karo, with IRRI, with the Rice Promotion Program at the Ministry of Agriculture. And today, that story is all over the country. Go to Tana River, go to Kwale, go to Taita Taveta, go to Western Kenya. The story is the same. Until today, we've started exporting Komboka rice to Rwanda because it has become so successful. So those are the kind of partnerships. So what did we do? We also invested again in those seed multipliers, certifying seed merchants to be able to ensure that that seed is within the areas where it can be found.
So our Tanzania story, what we did was just to emphasize to all the actors in the value chain, right from input, seed, provide high-yielding varieties, production, good agronomic practices to ensure that the Saro 5 gives you the 5, 6 metric tons, 8 metric tons per hectare. Losses, how do you reduce the losses? We show them. How do we dry it so that you reduce the breakage? So the effort in terms of competitiveness has to be done along the entire value chain in terms of increasing efficiency. But what we also found that other than at farm level, to make Tanzania more competitive was working with government. We were able to do value chains, policy studies, and we were able to show government that the ad hoc export bans that they were imposing on rice was not only increasing the cost of the cost of rice in Tanzania and making it less competitive, but the farmers were losing even more with the export bans. So as they were thinking that they are keeping the rice in Tanzania, it's better for Tanzania, the farmers were losing. We were able to show them that evidence. And so that's why you now see that they no longer have those, from 2015, 2016, the ad hoc bans reduced, export bans reduced when they understood the impact of some of those things. So we work closely with governments to ensure that we can also provide them with that evidence. We have seen, whether it is in Uganda, in Rwanda, government and transformation in the agriculture sector is a public-private collaboration. That transformation in Tanzania was heavy on private sector as well. They invested, private companies have square miles of irrigation schemes, private companies. They have gotten tax exemption to import leveling machines and all that, but it was a collaboration. So that one is undisputed.